What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video, please make sure you hit the like button and let me know what you think of today's very interesting discussion in the comment section below. If you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet, or you're living under a rock and seeing this video for the first time, I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that subscribe button below now so you never miss another sit down video. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get in to another very interesting organized crime topic. And on this channel, I have a lot of the time covered father and sons associated in the mafia, whether it's the Franzises, the Gottis, the Castellanos, the Persicos. It really hasn't mattered. But generally, as I've said before, one's life is arguably always decided for them. And in the case of mobsters, that's no different. Today's subject was a staple of Harlem, and his father was a very connected mobster. The story of Angelo and Joseph Urgitano next on the sit down. Before we get started today, I want to make it clear, in my opinion, Joseph Urgitano's nickname, Joey Cupcakes, is one of my favorite ever associated with the mafia. His father's is quite colorful as well. Make sure in the comment section below you drop your favorite mob nicknames. Angelo Urgitano was born in 1927. He would come up in East Harlem. And one thing can be said about East Harlem. I've talked about it on this channel before. In the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, East Harlem was the biggest Italian enclave in this country. It has always been known for being really the central Little Italy during the times above mentioned. Now, Angelo Urgitano would gain the nickname Angelo Cheesecake. Now, a lot of people have wondered where he got that nickname. According to an article in Savor magazine, Angelo Urgitano would tell the writer of the article directly, who was doing a piece about the food kind of offerings in East Harlem, he would tell the author that he got the nickname Angelo Cheesecake from his father, who was also named Angelo. Angelo Cheesecake's father, in the early 1900s, allegedly asked a girl from a window if he could have some cheesecake. The name would be passed down to his son, and down the road, Angelo Urgitano's son, Joseph, would have a very similar, very dessert-like nickname. Now, Angelo Urgitano was ID'd in the 50s as being a part and connected to the Lucchese crime family. Now, according to an FBI file in 1965, it would say that Angelo Urgitano was particularly close at that point with old school Gambino capo Arthur the Chink Leo. Now, Arthur Leo is a very old school guy from the Gambino crime family. He was very much in the business of narcotics alongside members of the Lucchese crime family, most notably Big John Ormento and Salvatore Tom Mix Santoro. So it might be possible that Angelo Urgitano was particularly strong or connected at one point to the drugs trade. It was also said that he was very involved for most of his career in loan sharking and extortion. Now, the same FBI file would state something very interesting in and around 1965 about Angelo Urgitano. An FBI informant would say, quote, that Urgitano had recently been broke, but suddenly appeared to have a lot of money, and that he was close to someone called Chink Leo. Now, the informant would also advise that Angelo Urgitano used to be nothing, appears to have plenty of money, and that he has been seen hanging around with an individual by the name of Guido. Now, the last name in the file was unknown, but that Guido was supposed to be from Florida, and that Urgitano was receiving money from Guido, but does not know what they're doing. He said it must be something illegitimate because of the amount of money they're spending together. Now, it has been talked about in the same file that Guido had been connected with multiple members of organized crime, including a person called Frank Belanca, who is connected to Fat Tony Salerno. So Urgitano in the 60s was very well known. Now, I'm unclear as to when Urgitano was made. Now, I have seen one reference that lists him connected to the family in the 50s. Now, we know the books closed in 1957. It did not reopen until the mid 70s, 1976. Now, it is possible that Angelo Urgitano was made in the late 50s before the books closed, or made in some sort of unsanctioned ceremony. Because if you look at an FBI file in 1972, Angelo Urgitano is listed as a made member of the mafia in the crew of Harlem capo Vincent Rayo. And he allegedly directly reported to Vincent Rayo. Now, at the time, that's actually a pretty important thing to say. When you're reporting directly to Vincent Rayo in the 70s, that's big, because at the time, Vincent Rayo was the consigliere to the boss of the family at the time, Carmine Mr. Tribbs Tremonti. Now, as we know, Tremonti essentially held the seat warm for Tony Ducks Corralo while he was in prison. But Vincent Rayo was a high-level guy. I mean, he was making moves in the Colombo family for decades, and Urgitano was directly reporting to him. Now, I want to talk now about Angelo's son, Joseph. Joseph Urgitano would be born on November 22nd, 1966. The Urgitanos, by this point, Angelo and his wife, had a home in the area of Pleasant Avenue, 289 Pleasant Avenue in East Harlem. Now, if you know anything about Pleasant Avenue, which can be seen here, it is a main thoroughfare in East Harlem. At one point, it was very connected in the drug trade. And the home that the Urgitanos lived at, which, from what I understand, according to property records, is still owned by Joseph Urgitano, was just around the corner from the Palma Boys Social Club. If we notice in this picture, if you see in the distance at the top of the photo, that is Mount Carmel Church, I believe, and that's Pleasant Avenue. So the home that they lived at was very close to the Palma Boys Social Club. Now, the area that they lived on Pleasant Avenue was between 114th Street and 115th Street. So again, Joey Urgitano, Joey Cupcakes, who he was then named after, and again, that has a connection to the Angelo Cheesecake nickname. He was always around gangsters. I mean, Joseph Urgitano's father was very connected. You know, he knew people in the Genovese family. He knew people in the Lucchese family. Now, it was rumored that Joey Urgitano would go to different homes of gangsters as a kid. He was around it. It's all he knew. And as we know, generally, if your father's in the mob, you're probably going to follow in his footsteps. Now, Joseph Urgitano would go to Cardinal Hayes High School in the Bronx, and it is rumored that he did get a high school degree. Now, once he graduates high school, Joey Urgitano begins delving into the world of the drug trade. Now, according to the Patreon show that I do with Dom Cicale, he would tell me that it was widely known that at the time in the mid 80s, late 80s in Harlem, Angelo Urgitano's son, Joseph Urgitano, was a big time drug dealer. He was selling weed, cocaine, heroin, and that it was common knowledge that he was actually supplying at one point Alpo Martinez, and that comes directly from Dom Cicale. Now, Dom would say that he got to know the Urgitanos through his uncle, Peter Cicale. Now, as we know, Peter Cicale did act in Goodfellas. He was Pete the Killer. Now, Dom's uncle was said to be very close with Angelo Cheesecake Urgitano, and that Joey and Dom began kind of moving and running around together. Now, Dom would say when he became a higher level drug trafficker, when he began getting kilos of narcotics, he was regularly traveling to Harlem to get the drugs. Now, one of the individuals that Dom Cicale was buying narcotics from was a person called Frankie Gatto. Now, he was the business partner of Joseph Urgitano. Now, at one point, one of the people that Gatto and Urgitano were getting drugs from essentially said they didn't want to deal with Joey Cupcakes anymore due to the fact of who his father was. And Frank kind of cut him out of the business, and things would kind of transcribe. Now, Joseph Urgitano was known throughout the neighborhood. He was a flashy dresser, an eccentric dresser, kind of an oddball dresser, but he had a Mercedes Benz. He was making good money in the drug trade. And as I said, he was dealing with some pretty heavy people at one point, even Alpo Martinez. Now, at one point, Dom Cicale would tell me that he and Joseph Urgitano allegedly sold a machine gun at one point to Alpo Martinez. So Joey's moving around. He's with a lot of people, but he probably did it a lot of under the eyes of his father. He probably didn't want his father to know that. Now, Dom Cicale obviously has his own story, but it is pretty interesting that at one point he was close to Joey Cupcakes. Now, Joseph Urgitano by the late 80s would have to deal with the fact of a mistake that he would make. He would willingly say that he shot Frank Gatto in the head in and around 1986, and that the body was dumped supposedly in the Hudson River in and around a park near East Harlem. Now, it was always wondered, why did Joe Urgitano kill Frank Gatto? It was supposedly over some sort of marijuana deal and the fact that they had just disagreed on some sort of drug issue. But Urgitano was a childhood friend. They were childhood friends, him and Frank Gatto. Urgitano would be sentenced to 9 to 27 years in New York State Prison on manslaughter and sale of controlled substance charges. So in 1988, Urgitano would head to state prison. Now, his father, Angelo Cheesecake Urgitano, would continue moving around the streets, eventually becoming a capo regime in the Lucchese crime family. Now, one of his associates, a person he would deal with regularly, was said to be a person called John Conti. Now, Conti is identified as a Lucchese soldier in various federal reports. And he, at one point, Conti was living in Vegas and was very connected into the casino business as well as gambling and loan sharking. So it was probable that Angelo Urgitano was regularly involved with that stuff going on out in Vegas. And at one point, Conti was actually put in the black book in Las Vegas. Now, we would also learn that Angelo Cheesecake, like his son Joe Cupcakes, was very feared. According to Michael Blutrick, who is the owner of Scores, who had many run-ins with mobsters while being the owner of Scores nightclub and strip club in Manhattan, Blutrick would say that at one point he dealt with Urgitano, probably, we would have to think, over some sort of an extortion racket, and that he at one point had water thrown on him by Angelo Urgitano to prove that he was not an informant. Now, luckily for Blutrick, who was an informant, he was not wearing a listening device that night, but he said he was particularly scared of Urgitano. Now, Angelo Urgitano would die in September of 1998. He was 70 years old. So obviously, his son, Joseph Urgitano, and yes, that is Urgitano. We'll talk a little bit about his kind of behavior and snappy and eccentric dressing in a little bit here. But Joe Urgitano is obviously in jail in 1998, so he is not able to kind of celebrate his father, but also attend the funeral services for him. Now, while inside, Joseph Urgitano would supposedly get a college degree, which we can give him credit for. He would be locked up until 2007 when he would be released on parole. Now, he would claim that once he got out, he had a job at the very famous Rayo's restaurant in East Harlem. And at one point, he claimed he was even related to the original owners of Rayo's. Now, I don't exactly know if the Urgitanos are related to the Rayo's. We obviously can understand by this video that at one point, Vincent Rayo, who was involved with Rayo's, was the captain and consigliere and was the captain to Angelo Urgitano. I don't know if they're related or he was just saying that. It is possible, though. I mean, again, they were all from the same neighborhood. And I'm sure at some point, a lot of people in East Harlem were related. they're all Italian. They're all from similar areas of Italy and Sicily. I don't know for a fact. That would have to go to some sort of historian that lived or knew about Harlem, which there are many. If you know about were they actually related, I'd love to know. But it is something that Joseph Urgitano would tell the parole board. Now, upon Joe Cupcake's release from prison, he can be regularly seen in many photographs, hobnobbing around with different people, having nice dinners. Here he can be seen with Martirano's restaurant in Atlantic City and Fort Lauderdale owner Steve Martirano. He can also be seen in this photo with a bike helmet on. He was a motorcycle enthusiast. Here he can be seen with Gerard Chili, of all people, who is the nephew of Joe Chili, Bonanno Capo. He was all over the place. Now, this photo is interesting. This is not of Joe Urgitano, but this is of Michael Groark, good-looking Louis Navarro, and Lucchese made member John Panisi. I bring this photo up because in 2012, Urgitano, alongside Groark in the middle and Navarro on the left, they would be involved in a bizarre situation in the area of West 14th Street and 9th Avenue. According to police reports, Groark, Navarro, and Joe Urgitano were involved in beating a man after some sort of words were exchanged in the area of the meatpacking district in Manhattan. And at one point, according to the NYPD, Joey Cupcakes allegedly beat the man up with a baseball bat. Now, Joe's lawyer claims that it was over a racial slur that he had made to someone behind Joey Cupcakes, but that would violate Joey Cupcakes' parole and he would head back to state prison. Now, according to John Panisi on his YouTube channel, Sitdown News, he would claim that at one point, Joe Cupcakes Urgitano would fall out of favor of the Lucchese crime family after it was said that he would bring around a person called Anthony Zoccalillo to a Bronx social club. Now, the problem for Joey Cupcakes in this situation is Anthony Zoccalillo, which I did a video on him here, he was a major mob informant in the 2010s and would bring cases against all sorts of people in the Lucchese and Genovese crime families, as well as the Bonanno family. Now, we obviously would think that Joey Cupcakes didn't know. Of course, he didn't know that Anthony Zoccalillo was wired for sound, but it was a major mistake. I don't know what Joey Cupcakes' standing in the family is now. However, it is something that he supposedly was involved with. Now, Joey Cupcakes would do about a year in prison for his parole violation and get out in and around 2013 or 2014. Now, in 2014, Joey Cupcakes' life would change forever. Now, one of the main things that you're hearing about Joey Cupcakes is he spent a long time of his adult life in prison. Keep in mind, he was born in 1966. So in and around 20 years old in 1986, he goes to prison. Doesn't get out until 2007. He's on the street for about 5 years, goes back to prison for another year. Most of his adult life has been in state prison. Now, in 2014, he was in a relationship with a woman who lived in the area of 2860 Burr Avenue in the Bronx. Now, from what I know about Joey Cupcakes, he was married at one point to a woman. They had children together, and I want to say he probably divorced her. They had some sort of separation. Joey began dating a new woman. Well, in and around 2014, the woman and Joey Cupcakes are out of her apartment in the Bronx, to which an individual, Luis Quinones, is seen on CCTV footage ringing her doorbell. Now, from what I've gathered, Quinones was a former boyfriend of this woman. Joey Cupcakes goes nuts. And what I'm about to do is I'm going to play the about 2.5-minute video of what would transpire. Now, notice the surveillance photo. You can see Quinones looking for her apartment, clicking the buzzer button, which he obviously probably doesn't know that Joey Cupcakes is up there. So he's probably pretty unsuspecting. He looks around, probably is waiting a little bit, kind of wondering what's going on. Now, this is note the time. This is about 10:30 in the morning. So we don't know what he wants. We don't know kind of the particulars of all this. But we're going to see soon flash Cupcakes and his girlfriend kind of running into the shot. You can see Cupcakes coming and his girlfriend's following him. Now, let me show you. Notice he's in his right hand, he's got a bag. In the bag is a knife and it's being concealed. You could see him walking quite quickly to the vestibule and you'll see him pop through the door and begin stabbing Quinones. You'll get a new view here. Notice there. So here we go. He comes to the door. Quinones sees him coming and boom, he begins stabbing him in the stomach area. They go through the door. He continues stabbing him, and you can see the girlfriend kind of frantically yelling and trying to stop this. He then pursues Quinones and continuously begins stabbing him multiple times. Quinones runs. He then follows him. She runs after them. And she obviously kind of is probably just yelling, stop. And this is all happening. This is about 2 minutes. This is a good amount of time. We can't see what's going on there, but they're probably continuing to stab. He's continuing to stab Quinones. And then Joey Cupcakes appears back in the video, and we see him kind of fleeing the scene. Now, this is all pretty important because, look, when you commit a crime, surveillance photos are hard to argue. And here you'll eventually see Joey Cupcakes leaving the scene of the crime. And if you notice, the guy's on the ground at this point. He's stabbing him a lot. And there Joey Cupcakes leaves. And he's trying to get up this guy. And there he leaves. And notice he's doesn't have anything. He doesn't pick the knife up or anything. And here he comes. Notice nothing in his hands. So pretty damning evidence there for Joey Cupcakes. Ultimately, Joey Cupcakes would plead not guilty on self-defense, believing that it was self-defense. Obviously, if you watch that video, that is not self-defense. Now, it is important to understand, Quinones did not die, but Joey Cupcakes would be hit with attempted murder charges. He would ultimately be found guilty in 2018 of first-degree assault and was sentenced to 18 years in state prison. Now, keep in mind, it was pretty damning. DNA was found on the handle of the knife. So, he's lucky that Quinones didn't die because Joey Cupcakes would probably be serving a lot more prison time than 18 years. Joey Cupcakes is currently sitting at Shawangunk Correctional Facility in New York State in Wallkill. He is eligible for parole in 2033 when he would be 66 years old. Joey Cupcakes is currently 56. There's a lot to say about Joey Cupcakes, and the one thing that I would tell you is never judge a book by its cover. If you saw Joey Cupcakes on the street, it almost looks like that at one point, if you've ever seen some of his wacky outfits, it almost seems like, and I mean this in the nicest way, his daughter attempted to dress him or one of his kids. And I don't know anything about his kids, but it almost looks like sometimes he does his best to look wacky. He's definitely an interesting and eccentric character. Joey Cupcakes has an Instagram. It is still up. There's hundreds of photos and videos. He's in photos with Chuck Zito and Fat Joe and all sorts of different celebrities. People respect him. They like Joey Cupcakes. He's always at restaurants like Rayo's. People enjoy him. He's an interesting guy. People like John Panisi have said he's a likable guy. A lot of people said a lot of good things about Joey, but the one thing everyone said is he is the real deal, and you should never judge him by how he looks. He will do what he has to do, and his prison time, his crimes, they have made it clear he shot his best friend in the head. He stabbed someone willingly with no issue. Just know that when you see someone dressed a certain certain way, never think one thing. You should always have your guard up. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is one that I'd been wanting to do for a while, and I hope I shed some light a little bit on the Urgitanos. There's one thing that I will end this video with. To this day, Joseph Joey Cupcakes Urgitano is not a made member of the mafia. He was always listed as a Lucchese associate. That's it. But he made a lot of money in the street selling drugs and developed a pretty fiery reputation. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure also you leave your favorite mob nicknames in the comments below. We'll see you next time here on The Sit Down.